So did you know that the Chinese spoken in mainland China and Taiwan can be very different? That sometimes they don't even understand each other, even though it's the same language. It's considered standard Mandarin Chinese. There's different slang and different pronunciation, and even some words, such as the word for pineapple, are different. There are some major and wild differences. So stick around. Today we're going to break down how mainland Chinese and Taiwanese Mandarin are different and why it matters. And if you stay around to the end, I will give you my opinion on which one you should learn and why. So let's go ahead. Let's get started. I'm Darren. I'm a traveling polyglot. I've traveled around the world. I like learning languages. I've been studying Chinese for a long time. I've been to mainland China and I've been to Taiwan many times for both of them. So I can give you a lot of background and context on this issue. Let's start with some context, some background. Mandarin Chinese, as I stated, is the official language in both mainland China and Taiwan. Now, we're not going to talk about politics or any of the political differences. We're just going to look at it linguistically. Mainland and Taiwanese Mandarin have evolved separately for decades, kind of like American and British English. After the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, even we back up before the Civil War, the Japanese, they had occupied Taiwan, and there are many people there who can speak Japanese or who were influenced by Japanese. They lost World War II, and it went back to mainland China, but there was a civil war, and in 1949, there was the split between mainland China and Taiwan. Like I said, we're not going to talk about politics, but there were some major linguistic differences, and the languages developed unique quirks. For instance, mainland China, they now use simplified Chinese characters called jiǎotàchē, while Taiwan uses the traditional Chinese characters, the fènglí. Some background on the jiǎotàchē and fènglí, the simplified and traditional Chinese characters. Traditional Chinese characters are, as they would sound, they are traditional. They are the characters that were used in China for thousands of years. That's a different topic, though. I do have a video that talks a bit about how Chinese characters work, and you can go back and watch that video to know more about Chinese characters and how they work. But to make it easy to understand for this video, the mainland Chinese government, after the Civil War, they decided to simplify the writing system. What they did is they took a lot of the characters and they looked at some of the cursive writing, and they just looked for ways to simplify strokes. They said it would increase literacy. However, at the same time, they also lost some of their traditional value. The traditional ones, they are much more complicated and more difficult to learn, but they are more aesthetically pleasing, more beautiful, so to say. I think people will agree with that statement. You can let me know what you think in the comments. Which one do you like better? I use both of them, and simplified Chinese characters are also used outside of China. Like if you go to Singapore or Malaysia, or in Chinese communities in Thailand, or even overseas in other countries. However, Hong Kong and Taiwan, they still use the traditional Chinese characters, and you'll see them also in use overseas too. Japan and Korea, they also use the traditional characters, though Japan simplified a few of them. That also is a different topic. Let's go on to the next part. So the differences, they do go way beyond writing. Also, there is the accent, the pronunciation. There's the difference between standard Mandarin Chinese in China, mainland China, called Putonghua, which is based on the Beijing standard. It has the strong R, the retroflex sound, and you would hear things like sh, which means to eat, sh, which means yes or to be, and things like r, hot, or sun. You also hear words like nar, means where. They put the R at the end also. Instead of saying nali in Taiwan, you would hear people say nali, where is it? But in Beijing and northern China, they will say nar. And instead of saying zhe or zheli, they'd say jar for here. So those are unique differences. However, I also have to point out that in some parts of China, especially in the southern China, the accent may actually sound closer to Taiwan. And we'll get to that in a minute. That's where they soften their retroflex, or they may even drop it. For instance, in Taiwan, instead of saying how re, it's very hot, how re, they would say how le. They would change it to an L sound, how le. You You also will hear that, as I said, in mainland China and Taiwan. They tend to mix in some Minanhua, some Hokkien, and they have their own Taiwanese dialect. That's also a different topic. That also comes from Fujian, and that is because most of the immigrants that went to Taiwan came from southern China, particularly Fujian area, and that is the closest area if you look at a map. So that may be why. Let's look at some vocabulary differences. Yes, there is vocabulary differences between mainland China and Taiwan. For instance, the word for pineapple in mainland China is bōluó, and in Taiwan, they say fènglí. Also in Taiwan, instead of the sound, if you have studied Pinyin, you know the E, it makes an sound. I also have some videos on Chinese Pinyin. You can watch them too. The correct pronunciation in mainland China, in Beijing, would be fènglí. However, that is a word used in Taiwan, and they make it more of an O sound, so they would say fènglí instead of fènglí. So it's actually fènglí. And in mainland China, of course, it's bōluó. How about bicycle? Well, in mainland China, they would say zìxíngchē. Over in Taiwan, they say jiǎotàchē. So a chē is a car. It's used for any type of vehicle, like also bicycle. Also, you would hear it in words like train, bōluó. If you want to see a video about transportation words in Chinese, please like the video, write me a comment, tell me that you're interested so I can know to make it. And when you subscribe to the channel, it helps more people learn about our channel, and they will be able to improve their Chinese too. And we also have tips about some other languages like Thai and Indonesian or Malay and a little bit of Arabic. So if you want to be a polyglot, you're definitely in the right place. It's free to subscribe. However, let's move on. So another word that is different is the word for software. Yes, in mainland China, they would say rōnjian. However, in Taiwan, they would say rōnti. They would not say rōnjian. If you say rōnjian, they might think you're a communist or something. But again, we're not getting political. We're just talking about languages here. Imagine going to Taiwan. As I said, you go to Taipei and you go into the bookstore. You ask for a book, Ranti Shu. That would be correct. But if you said Ranjian Shu, well, you might get some blank stares. So then you fly over to Beijing and you get confused again. And you say Ranti Shu. Again, they would probably look at you funny. Just like you came from Taiwan or something. There's a difference. So there's also a lot of difference in slang between mainland China and Taiwan. Mainland China, you might hear something like liu 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 or awesome. Yes, it's 666. Yeah, that has a different meaning in some cultures. But in China, it's a good thing. It means awesome. However, in Taiwan, han li hai. They always say li hai for everything. It's a very common phrase that you would hear in Taiwan. You'll hear that all the time. Instead of saying 我不知道, I don't know, they would probably say 我不知道, because as I talked about, they would lose the zh sound. But more likely, they also just say 不晓得, I don't know. 不晓得 in China, in mainland China, you'll hear 不知道, which means I don't know. So yeah, you go and you ask for your Ranjian Shu in Taipei. They're going to say 不晓得, or they might just say 听不懂. 听不懂 means I don't understand. And that one is common in both mainland China and in Taiwan. These vocabulary words, they will probably be the same everywhere in mainland China. You can use Ranjian or zìxíngchē. However, the pronunciation, as I said, like in Fujian or in some other parts of southern China, might actually be closer to what you would hear in Taipei. For instance, they would probably say 我不知道 instead of 我不知道, because they have a hard time making the retroflex sound because of the southern Chinese dialects. Chinese dialects are a whole different topic. It's also a very interesting topic. So if you want to see a video on that, you can also let me know. You'll also hear the L's and the N's flipped around a lot, not only in Taiwan, but also in parts of mainland China, particularly, again, in the south. Even if you go to Nanjing, they might call their city Lanjing because they confuse their N's and their L's. Or they might call their boyfriend a 男朋友 instead of a 男朋友. Those are some of the differences between mainland and Taiwan Chinese. So which one should you learn? Yeah, if you stuck around till the end. Now I'm going to tell you what I think you should learn. Give you some advice. That's your reward for staying with me. It really just depends on which one you should learn. If you're going to go to mainland China, then of course I would suggest you learn Beijing standard Putonghua. And if you're going to be in overseas communities, you can also learn Putonghua because most people will understand it. Like if you're in northern Thailand or even in Malaysia or in Singapore, and you could even learn a dialect because a lot of them speak different dialects. That's a different topic, but most people will understand Putonghua or standard Mandarin, Beijing Mandarin Chinese. And if you are planning on going to Taiwan or you like Taiwanese culture for whatever reason, then you can focus on Taiwanese style Mandarin if you're going to stay there. And if you're not planning to go to mainland China or to some of those other countries, I think if you're going to just do business in the greater Chinese speaking community, well, you probably, as I said, want to learn the Beijing standard Chinese. And then you can learn some Taiwanese slang on the side or about Taiwan. Obviously, I learned both of them. When I started to study in university, my first teacher was from Taiwan, and I went to Taiwan first. So I actually studied Taiwanese style. And then I went to mainland China, study abroad, and I learned the mainland Chinese. And I started with traditional characters, and then I switched to simplified characters. And I think that is a good way. You should probably learn both of them. Maybe you can start with the simplified ones. If you're going to learn Chinese well, though, I would suggest you also learn the traditional ones because they are a very important part of Chinese culture and Chinese heritage. And yeah, that's my take. That's my opinion. Which version do you prefer? Please let me know in the comments. If you like the video, smash that like button. Subscribe for more language deep dives. Don't forget to go and watch the video about Chinese characters. We'll put a link above. See you in the next video. 再见，加油！